Standing before one of the Olmec Colossal Heads is like staring into the face of a mystery carved in stone. These enormous sculptures, some weighing over 20 tons, tower over the landscape with expressions so lifelike, they seem to whisper secrets from a forgotten world. How did an ancient civilization, without metal tools or the wheel, manage to quarry, transport, and sculpt these massive basalt boulders with such precision? The answer lies buried in the jungles of Mexico, where the Olmec, often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, left behind a legacy that continues to baffle archaeologists and historians alike. Imagine the sheer effort it would take to move a single one of these heads, each as heavy as several elephants, across miles of rugged terrain. The Olmec did it over 3,000 years ago, shaping their world with nothing but stone tools, raw ingenuity, and an understanding of their environment that still astounds us today. Who were these people? What drove them to create such monumental works, and perhaps most intriguing of all, why did they carve these faces with such striking individuality, as if capturing the likeness of real individuals frozen in time? This is more than just a story about ancient art. It's a window into a civilization that laid the foundations for every great culture that followed in the Americas. From their colossal heads to their cryptic symbolism, the Olmec left clues that hint at a society far more advanced and far more enigmatic than we once believed. As we peel back the layers of time, we'll explore the theories, the controversies, and the unanswered questions surrounding these stone giants. Were they rulers, gods, or something else entirely? The truth may be hidden in the earth, waiting to be uncovered, so let's journey together into the heart of this mystery, where every discovery raises new questions, and where the past speaks in a language of stone. The story of the Olmec Colossal Heads took a dramatic turn in the mid-19th century, when a traveler named José Melgar stumbled upon something extraordinary in the sweltering jungles of southern Mexico. While exploring the area near Veracruz in 1862, Melgar encountered a massive stone head half buried in the earth, its broad nose, thick lips, and enigmatic expression unlike anything known in the Americas at the time. His discovery sent shockwaves through the small circle of scholars who heard about it, sparking debates that would last for decades. At first, many struggled to make sense of these sculptures. The head's striking features didn't match the artistic styles of the Aztecs or Maya, the only Mesoamerican civilizations well documented at the time. This led to wild speculation. Some theorists, struck by the broad facial structures, suggested they represented visitors from Africa, an idea that gained traction in an era when archaeology was still entangled with colonial prejudices and pseudoscientific racial theories. Others, captivated by the sheer scale and precision of the carvings, even floated the possibility of extraterrestrial influence. The truth, however, was far more fascinating and far closer to home. As more heads were uncovered, archaeologists began piecing together the puzzle. Radiocarbon dating and stylistic analysis revealed these monuments belonged to the Olmec civilization, which flourished between 1200 and 400 BC centuries before the rise of more famous Mesoamerican societies. The so-called African features were actually deliberate artistic choices, possibly depicting Olmec rulers or revered ancestors. The basalt itself came from local volcanic mountains, quarried and transported through a combination of log rollers, rafts, and raw manpower. Far from being alien, these heads were a testament to human ingenuity, a cultural signature of a society that shaped the spiritual and political landscape of ancient Mesoamerica. Yet the mystery didn't end there. Even as the outlandish theories faded, new questions emerged. Why did the Olmec invest so much labor into these sculptures? Were they portraits of specific individuals, or symbolic representations of power? Each discovery peeled back another layer, revealing not a lost connection to distant lands, but a homegrown legacy of artistry and ambition, one that continues to challenge our understanding of the ancient world. To understand the sheer magnitude of the Olmec's achievement, we need to step into their world, a landscape of tangled jungles, winding rivers, and unforgiving terrain. The Olmec heartland, centered in what's now the Mexican states of Veracruz and Tabasco, was a place of both abundance and obstacle. Lush with fertile soil and crisscrossed by waterways, it provided the resources needed for a thriving civilization. But it also posed a monumental challenge: how to move massive basalt boulders, some weighing as much as 24 tons, from distant quarries to ceremonial centers miles away. The stone itself came from the Tuxtla Mountains, particularly Cerro Sintepec, an ancient volcanic region rich in the dense, dark basalt prized by Olmec sculptors. But here's the staggering part: the nearest quarries were over 50 miles from where many of the colossal heads were eventually placed. That's like hauling a loaded semi-truck through swampy lowlands, dense forests, and unpredictable rivers, all without wheels, pack animals, or metal tools. The Olmec didn't just carve these heads, they orchestrated a logistical masterpiece. So how did they do it? Archaeologists believe the answer lies in a combination of ingenuity and brute force. The basalt was likely quarried using stone tools and fire, heating the rock to weaken it before chiseling out manageable blocks. Then came the real test: transportation. Some theories suggest they used log rollers, dragging the stones over land with teams of laborers. Others point to the region's extensive river networks, proposing that the Olmec floated the boulders on rafts during seasonal floods, leveraging the water's natural power to move what human strength alone could not. Imagine the coordination this required: hundreds of workers pulling in unison, navigating treacherous terrain, all to deliver a single block of stone to be transformed into a lasting monument. The effort speaks volumes about the Olmec societal organization. This wasn't just art, it was a statement of collective will, a demonstration of control over both nature and human labor. And it raises a tantalizing question: what compelled them to invest so much in these sculptures? Was it devotion, power, or something deeper? The landscape itself holds clues, but the full story remains etched in stone, waiting to be read. The basalt used to carve the Olmec Colossal Heads wasn't just any stone, it was a deliberate choice, as precise as the sculptures themselves. Sourced from the Tuxtla Mountains, this volcanic rock possessed qualities that made it ideal for monumental art. Dense and fine-grained, it resisted erosion, ensuring these faces would endure millennia. But basalt's durability came at a cost. It's brutally hard to shape, especially with the rudimentary tools the Olmecs had at their disposal. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of their toolkit: stone hammers, chisels made from harder minerals like jadate, and abrasives like sand and water. Picture teams of artisans patiently pecking away at the rock's surface, refining curves and features over months or even years. Some theories suggest they used water to soften the stone slightly, or mixed it with sand to create a primitive grinding paste. The precision of the carvings, from the subtle indentations of eyelids to the intricate headdresses, hints at a mastery of technique passed down through generations. Yet the question lingers: how did they achieve such smooth, lifelike details without metal tools? One clue lies in the unfinished heads discovered near quarries. These works in progress show clear marks of repeated pounding and scoring, suggesting a multi-stage process. Artisans likely roughed out the basic shape at the quarry, then painstakingly refined it at its final location. The finer details, lips, nostrils, the furrows of brows, may have involved a combination of percussion and abrasion, with craftsmen switching between tools as delicate as bone picks to broader stone gouges. The real marvel isn't just the tools, but the knowledge behind them. The Olmecs understood their material intimately, exploiting natural fractures in the basalt to reduce labor, or orienting carvings to follow the stone's grain. This wasn't brute force, it was a dialogue between artisan and earth, and it forces us to reconsider what primitive really means, because these heads stand as proof that ingenuity, not technology, is the true measure of a civilization's greatness. Reconstructing the Olmec's carving process is like peeling back layers of time to reveal an ancient workshop in action. The first step began in the Tuxtla Mountains, where artisans identified the perfect basalt boulders, examining them for hidden flaws or fractures that could ruin months of labor. Once selected, the real work began, separating the stone from the earth. Without metal wedges or explosives, the Olmec likely used a combination of fire and water to weaken the rock. By heating the stone with controlled fires, then dousing it with cold water, they exploited thermal shock to create cracks along natural fault lines. This method, still used by some traditional stonemasons today, would have allowed them to harvest manageable blocks from the mountainside. With the raw material extracted, the rough shaping commenced. Using heavy stone mauls, some weighing over 20 pounds, teams of workers pounded the basalt into a crude head-like form. Archaeologists have found unfinished heads at quarries, their surfaces pockmarked by thousands of hammer strikes, revealing how the Olmec gradually reduced the stone's bulk. The most skilled artisans then stepped in, transitioning from brute force to precision. They switched to smaller, sharper tools, likely chisels made of jadeite or other durable minerals, to outline facial features and headdresses. At this stage, every strike carried risk. One misplaced blow could ruin months of effort. The final refinement was where true artistry emerged. For delicate details like lips, eyelids, and ear ornaments, craftsmen may have switched to abrasion techniques. Rubbing the surface with wet sand or crushed quartz, they could achieve astonishing smoothness. Some finished heads have surfaces so polished, they reflect light like glass. The headdresses, often decorated with intricate knots or symbols, required bone or wood tools to incise fine lines without fracturing the stone. This wasn't just carving, it was a dialogue between artist and material, a patient dance of pressure and patience. What's remarkable isn't just the techniques, but the scale of coordination they imply. From quarry to finished sculpture, each head represented countless hours of labor, specialized knowledge, and an unbroken chain of skill passed through generations. The Olmec didn't just leave us statues, they left a masterclass in how to shape the unyielding earth with nothing but human ingenuity. Staring into the weathered visage of an Olmec Colossal Head, you're immediately struck by their startling realism. The full, downturned lips, the broad noses flaring slightly at the nostrils, the heavy-lidded eyes gazing with an almost unsettling intensity. These aren't generic symbols of power, they feel like portraits, capturing individuality in a way that's rare for ancient monumental art. Take the head from San Lorenzo known as Monument 1. Its plump cheeks and slightly parted lips give it an air of quiet authority, while the furrowed brow of La Cobata's head suggests stern contemplation. Even the headdresses, adorned with intricate knots or abstract symbols, vary dramatically from one sculpture to another, hinting at personal insignias or ranks. This level of detail becomes even more remarkable when contrasted with other Olmec sculptures. While their jade figurines and altar carvings often depict stylized, almost otherworldly beings, part human, part jaguar, the colossal heads are grounded in unmistakable humanity. The famous were jaguar babies, for instance, snarl with exaggerated fangs and slanted eyes, embodying myth rather than mortality, yet the heads, with their asymmetrical features and subtle wrinkles, seem to memorialize real people. What could explain this dichotomy? Some scholars argue the heads represent revered rulers, their likenesses immortalized to assert political dominance. Others see them as deified ancestors, their stern faces meant to watch over ceremonial spaces. The distinctively thick lips and wide nasal bridges, once misread as evidence of African contact, are now understood as deliberate artistic conventions, possibly exaggerating traits associated with elite lineage or divine favor. Perhaps the most compelling clue lies in their placement. Many heads were arranged in ceremonial precincts, facing outward as if guarding sacred spaces. Their expressions, some serene, others stern, may have been carefully calibrated to evoke specific emotions in viewers, blending portraiture with propaganda. Whatever their purpose, they stand as a testament to an artistic tradition that valued both realism and symbolism, leaving us faces that feel startlingly alive across 3,000 years. Theories about the purpose of the Olmec Colossal Heads are as varied as the expressions carved into their stone faces. One compelling idea is that they depict powerful rulers, their stern visages meant to legitimize authority and intimidate rivals. Think of them as ancient billboards broadcasting dominance. Each had a permanent declaration of who held power in Olmec society. Archaeologists point to the individualized features as evidence, suggesting these weren't generic leaders but specific individuals immortalized in basalt. The heads may have served as a visual dynasty, with each new ruler adding their likeness to a growing row of stone ancestors, reinforcing continuity and control. Another tantalizing theory ties the heads to the ritual ballgame, a sacred tradition that spread across Mesoamerica. Some scholars note the thick, padded headgear resembling protective gear worn by players. Could these sculptures honor victorious athletes or even sacrificed warriors? The ballgame wasn't just sport, it was a cosmic drama, reenacting myths of life, death, and regeneration. If the heads represent players, they might symbolize the intersection of human achievement and divine favor, their watchful eyes overseeing ceremonies where the stakes were life itself. Then there's the spiritual angle. The Olmecs were jaguar motif, a recurring blend of human and feline traits hints at a deep connection to shamanic transformation. Some heads display subtle jaguar-like qualities, heavy brows mirroring the predator's broad skull, or downturned mouths echoing its snarl. Were these sculptures depictions of rulers channeling the jaguar's power, or deities bridging the human and spirit worlds? The head's placement near ceremonial centers supports this idea. Their unblinking gaze may have served as a conduit between realms, anchoring the supernatural to the earthly. And let's not overlook the ancestor hypothesis. In many indigenous Mesoamerican cultures, veneration of the dead was central to identity and land claims. The head's lifelike details, wrinkles, scars, even individualized ear ornaments suggest portraits meant to keep the dead present among the living. Imagine standing before one, its sheer size forcing you to look up, its unflinching stare a reminder that the past was always watching. What's striking is how these theories intertwine. A ruler could also be a ball player, a shaman, and a revered ancestor, roles blending in a society where power, ritual, and lineage were inseparable. The heads don't just represent one truth, they're a layered expression of Olmec belief, where stone became a canvas for politics, spirituality, and memory. Every glance at these faces invites us to reconsider not just who they were, but how the Olmec saw their place in the cosmos. Pinpointing exactly when the Olmec Colossal Heads were carved has been a puzzle requiring multiple scientific detective stories. For decades, archaeologists relied on radiocarbon dating, measuring the decay of carbon-14 in organic materials found near the sculptures, charcoal from ceremonial fires, plant fibers embedded in ancient plaster floors, even pollen trapped in sediment layers all whispered the same story. These heads belong to a civilization thriving between 1200 and 400 BC. But early attempts at dating revealed frustrating gaps. Some heads appeared centuries older than others, and their styles varied enough to suggest a long, evolving artistic tradition rather than a single burst of activity. Newer techniques like thermoluminescence have sharpened the picture. This method measures the last time minerals in ceramic or stone were exposed to heat or sunlight, perfect for analyzing the basalt itself. When applied to tool marks on unfinished heads or fragments from quarry sites, it confirms something remarkable. The Olmecs were carving these monuments for over 800 years. The oldest, like those at San Lorenzo, date to around 1200 BC, while heads from La Venta and Tres Zapotes were still being shaped as late as 400 BC. That's like comparing medieval cathedrals to modern skyscrapers, a span of time so vast, it forces us to rethink how artistic traditions endured across generations. Yet even these methods have quirks. Stratigraphy studying soil layers sometimes contradicts radiocarbon dates. At La Venta, heads found in deeper layers, which should logically be older, occasionally yielded younger carbon dates than those above them. The culprit: Olmec builders frequently reshape their ceremonial centers, digging up and reburying monuments in ways that scrambled the timeline. Now scientists are turning to isotopic analysis, examining oxygen and strontium signatures in the basalt to trace not just when the heads were carved, but where and how often quarries were used. Early results suggest the Olmec returned to certain mountain sources for centuries, treating them as sacred spaces intertwined with their art. Each new technique peels back another layer, revealing a civilization that didn't just vanish after 400 BC, but transformed, leaving its mark in stone for us to decode across millennia. Placing the Olmec Colossal Heads beside the Maya stelae, or Aztec monoliths, reveals both striking contrasts and eerie similarities that hint at a tangled artistic lineage across Mesoamerica. The Maya, for instance, carved towering stone slabs depicting rulers in elaborate regalia, but where Olmec heads exude raw, visceral presence with their unadorned faces, Maya stelae are layered with hieroglyphs, celestial symbols, and intricate costumes that transform leaders into godlike figures. Yet look closer and you'll notice shared artistic DNA, the emphasis on portraiture, the exaggerated facial features that convey power, even the way both cultures used stone as a permanent record of identity. The Olmec heads might lack the Maya's flamboyant detail, but their sheer physicality, the way light plays across smooth cheekbones, or the subtle asymmetry of a mouth, suggests both traditions sprang from a deep reverence for the human face as a vessel of authority. This connection becomes even clearer when examining the Olmec's baby-face figurines alongside the Maya's dwarf sculptures. Both depict stocky, childlike figures with similar bodily proportions, though separated by centuries. Even the Aztecs' colossal Coatlicue statue, though more abstract, echoes the Olmec scale and presence, a reminder that monumentality itself may have been an artistic inheritance. But was this direct influence or parallel innovation? Some scholars argue the Olmec were the mother culture, seeding ideas that blossomed elsewhere. Others see a mosaic of regional styles borrowing selectively from each other, like neighbors sharing tools without following the same blueprint. The debate heats up when we consider the word jaguar motif. Olmec sculptures often blend human and feline traits, a theme later echoed in the Maya's jaguar deities and the Aztecs' warrior cults, yet the Olmec's version feels primal, more snarl than symbolism, while later iterations become stylized, woven into complex mythologies. This evolution suggests not blind copying, but adaptation. The Olmec provided a vocabulary of forms that others refined to fit their own stories. Perhaps the most compelling evidence of connection lies not in art, but in infrastructure. The Olmec ceremonial centers, with their aligned plazas and pyramid mounds, became a template for later cities like Teotihuacan and Tikal. The heads themselves may have inspired the Mayas' penchant for monumental portraiture, not through direct imitation, but by demonstrating how stone could command space and memory. What emerges isn't a simple story of one civilization teaching another, but of a creative dialogue spanning millennia. The Olmec didn't just influence later cultures, they set a challenge how to carve identity into the earth that resonated across Mesoamerica. Their heads stand as both ancestors and outliers, whispering that innovation isn't always about invention, but recognizing the power in a face staring back through time. The idea that the Olmec Colossal Heads depict African visitors is one of those theories that refuses to fade, despite being thoroughly dismantled by modern scholarship. It first gained traction in the mid-19th century when European explorers, unfamiliar with the diversity of indigenous American facial features, saw the broad noses and full lips of the sculptures and assumed they couldn't possibly represent local populations. This assumption says more about the biases of early archaeologists than it does about the heads themselves, projecting colonial-era racial frameworks onto a civilization that had never encountered Africa. Genetic evidence has since delivered the most definitive rebuttal. Studies of ancient Olmec remains, including DNA extracted from burial sites at El Manati and San Lorenzo, show no markers linking them to African populations. Instead, they share clear ancestry with other indigenous groups of Mesoamerica. Even more telling, isotopic analysis of teeth from Olmec-era skeletons reveals diets consistent with local maize agriculture, not the culinary traditions of distant continents. The head's so-called African features are now understood as deliberate artistic conventions, perhaps exaggerating traits associated with elite status or supernatural power, much like the elongated heads of Maya royalty or the idealized proportions of Greek statues. Archaeology paints a similar picture. Not a single artifact of African origin has ever been found in Olmec sites. No tools, no pottery, no textiles. Contrast this with the abundance of jade from Guatemala or obsidian from central Mexico, proving the Olmec actively traded within their known world. Even the basalt quarries for the heads were local, sourced from the Tuxtla Mountains just 50 miles away. If there had been transatlantic contact, where's the material evidence? The persistence of this theory reveals a deeper issue: the tendency to attribute ancient achievements to outsiders rather than crediting indigenous innovation. The Olmec didn't need outside inspiration to create masterpieces. Their art, like their civilization, emerged from the rich cultural soil of Mesoamerica, a truth written not just in stone, but in bone, earth, and time itself. Scattered across the Olmec heartland, half-formed faces emerge from rough blocks of basalt, frozen in mid-creation like unfinished sentences from the past. At the Cerro Sintepec quarries, archaeologists have uncovered partially carved heads, their features only hinted at beneath the stone's surface. One such fragment shows the faint outline of a brow and nose, abandoned before the eyes could take shape. Another lies toppled on its side, the back still unworked, as if the artisans downed tools and walked away. These haunting relics raise an obvious question: why would a civilization so devoted to these monuments leave them incomplete? One theory points to political turmoil. Olmec society wasn't static. Power shifted between city-states like San Lorenzo and La Venta over centuries. A head left unfinished at a quarry might mark the sudden fall of a ruler, their likeness deemed unworthy of completion by a rival faction. Imagine a scenario where sculptors, midway through their work, receive word that their patron has been overthrown, the stone visage of a deposed leader suddenly becoming a liability rather than a tribute. Then there's the environmental angle. Basalt wasn't inexhaustible, and certain quarries show signs of being worked to depletion. Some unfinished heads cluster near exhausted veins, their rough forms abandoned when quality stone ran short. Even more intriguing are heads fractured during carving. A single misaligned strike could crack the basalt beyond repair, forcing artisans to discard months of labor. But perhaps the most evocative explanation is ritual. Mesoamerican cultures often saw sacred objects as living entities. If a head was damaged during creation, whether by human error or natural flaws in the stone, it might have been considered spiritually tainted, unfit to house the essence of a ruler or deity. At La Venta, one fractured head was carefully buried in a pit, suggesting its abandonment wasn't negligence but ceremony. These unfinished works offer something rare in archaeology: a glimpse into process rather than product. Tool marks preserved on their surfaces reveal the exact techniques used, the transition from heavy pounding to finer chiseling, the way artisans probed the stone's grain before committing to details. They're snapshots of artistry interrupted, reminding us that the Olmec weren't just monolithic sculptors, but people whose ambitions sometimes outpaced their grasp. The true mystery isn't why some heads were abandoned, but why so many were completed against staggering odds. Each finished monument stands not just as a triumph of skill, but as a testament to the will that carried it through, whether politics, and fragile stone notwithstanding. The unfinished ones, though, whisper of alternate histories, the heads that might have been, and the hands that never got to shape them. In 2010, a team of archaeologists and engineers decided to tackle one of the Olmec's greatest mysteries head-on literally. Their mission? To carve and transport a full-scale replica of a colossal head using only tools and techniques available 3,000 years ago. The experiment, conducted near the ancient Olmec site of San Lorenzo, quickly revealed the staggering challenges hidden behind these stone giants. Starting with a basalt boulder weighing over 8 tons modest compared to some Olmec heads, they soon realized brute strength alone wouldn't suffice. Even with 50 volunteers straining against thick ropes, the stone refused to budge across the muddy terrain. The solution lay in the Olmec's intimate understanding of their environment. By layering a path of split logs as rollers and lubricating them with water, the team finally achieved movement, at a glacial pace of just 300 feet per day. The real revelation came when they attempted to navigate slopes. Without brakes or pivoting mechanisms, the replica head nearly careened out of control multiple times, highlighting how the Olmec must have planned routes meticulously, avoiding inclines where possible. Modern participants describe the ordeal as bone-crushing, with every shift in the stone's balance threatening to crush limbs or snap ropes. This hands-on experiment exposed another layer of ingenuity, the likely use of temporary earthen ramps. By building inclined pathways with packed soil and clay, the Olmec could have eased their loads onto stable platforms before final placement, a technique later perfected by the Maya and Aztecs. But perhaps the most surprising discovery was the social dimension. Moving just one head required constant coordination, with teams rotating every 20 minutes to prevent exhaustion. Chants and rhythmic drumming may have synchronized pulls, turning back-breaking labor into a collective ritual. The 2010 project estimated that transporting a single full-sized head would demand over 1,000 person-days of effort, an investment suggesting these sculptures weren't just art, but societal cornerstones. The experiment didn't just replicate ancient methods, it revealed a culture capable of marshalling unity on a scale that still inspires awe. And then there's the water hypothesis. Scholars like archaeologist David Grove propose that during seasonal floods, the Olmec might have floated heads on reed barges along rivers, a theory bolstered by the proximity of many heads to ancient waterways. In 2015, another team tested this idea, lashing a smaller replica to a raft made of local materials. The result, water transport, proved exponentially faster than overland hauling, with the head covering in hours what would take weeks on land. Yet this method had its own perils. Currents could capsize loads, and submerged obstacles risked smashing precious cargo. The choice between river and road likely depended on distance, season, and the Olmec's hard-won knowledge of their landscape's every contour. These modern experiments peel back the layers of Olmec achievement, showing that their true mastery wasn't just in carving stone, but in solving problems with nothing but creativity and collective will. Each head represents not just a face, but a triumph of logistics, a marriage of muscle and mind, and the kind of persistence that reshapes the earth. The steamy jungles of the Olmec heartland have guarded their secrets well, not by design, but through the relentless decay that defines tropical archaeology. Unlike the arid deserts of Egypt, where papyrus and wood can survive millennia, Mexico's humid lowlands devour organic material with startling efficiency. Ropes made from maguey fibers, wooden sledges, even the woven mats that may have cushioned the colossal heads during transport, all have rotted away, leaving only faint traces in the soil. At some sites, archaeologists find ghostly impressions where logs once lay beneath a head, preserved as mineral stains in the earth. These phantom remnants hint at the Olmec's ingenious transport methods, but without the physical tools themselves, reconstructing their techniques becomes a game of shadows and educated guesses. Looting has erased even more of the story. For over a century before formal excavations began, treasure hunters ransacked Olmec sites, prizing jade artifacts over ordinary tools or domestic items. At La Venta in the 1930s, oil exploration crews bulldozed ancient platforms, unknowingly obliterating context that could have revealed how sculptures were staged or moved. Early archaeologists, though well-intentioned, often focused on extracting impressive monuments rather than documenting subtle clues. Matthew Stirling's pioneering digs in the 1940s, for example, recovered magnificent heads but paid little attention to the soil layers around them, layers that might have held pollen, seeds, or microscopic evidence of the ropes and ramps used in their installation. Modern techniques are now filling some of these gaps. LiDAR surveys, which peer through dense foliage with laser precision, have uncovered ancient causeways at San Lorenzo that may have served as processional routes for moving sculptures. Soil chemistry analysis can detect elevated phosphates, a telltale sign of decomposed organic matter, suggesting where wooden rollers or temporary structures once stood. Still, the losses are irreversible. At Tres Zapotes, looters hacked apart a colossal head in the 1960s, selling fragments on the black market. What survived was painstakingly reassembled, but the damage to its surface erased tool marks that could have revealed exact carving methods. The greatest tragedy isn't just the missing artifacts, but the severed connections they represent. Every rotted fiber or looted fragment was a potential thread in the Olmec story, one that might have explained how they coordinated hundreds of workers, or why certain quarries were favored. Now archaeologists must read between the lines, relying on ethnographic parallels with modern indigenous stonemasons or experimental reconstructions to bridge the gaps. It's a reminder that every colossal head we see today is a survivor, not just of time, but of humanity's competing impulses to cherish the past and exploit it. The elaborate headgear crowning the Olmec Colossal Heads isn't just decoration, it's a coded language of power, skill, and identity. Look closely at any of these sculptures, and you'll notice their helmets vary dramatically, from tight-fitting caps studded with abstract symbols to broad, padded bands resembling athletic gear. One head from La Venta wears what looks like a knotted band across its forehead, the intricate loops mirroring the rope motifs found in later Mesoamerican art. Another sports a flattened disc-like crown, its surface etched with designs that may represent celestial bodies or clan emblems. These aren't random embellishments, they're deliberate statements, broadcasting status like a royal seal or military insignia. An intriguing theory links some headpieces to the Mesoamerican ballgame, a ritual sport with life or death stakes. Several helmets bear a striking resemblance to the padded yoke worn by players to protect their hips during the game. The thick, rounded bands could symbolize victory, a champion's trophy immortalized in stone. This fits with Olmec art elsewhere, like the famous Las Limas figure, which depicts a seated youth holding a jaguar baby while wearing similar protective gear. If the heads represent deified ball players, their headgear might commemorate not just athletic prowess, but the sacred role of the game as a bridge between worlds. Yet there's another layer tied to rulership. Compare the heads to smaller Olmec sculptures of elites, like the jade figurines from La Venta's offering 4. Many wear identical helmets, suggesting a visual shorthand for authority. The variation in design, some plain, others ornate, could denote ranks or lineages, much like European crowns differentiate kings from dukes. Notably, the most intricate headgear appears on heads found in ceremonial centers, while simpler versions cluster near administrative buildings. This spatial distinction hints at a hierarchy where the sacred and secular intertwined. Then there's the material question. Actual helmets from this era haven't survived, but depictions in ceramic and jade offer clues. Some may have been woven from plant fibers, others fashioned from animal hide or even jade plates. The stone versions we see on the heads likely idealized these perishable originals, elevating them to eternal symbols. What's undeniable is their intentionality, every knot, every groove carved with precision, as if the Olmec understood that power resides not just in the face, but in what crowns it. These headpieces transform the heads from mere portraits into narratives. A ruler's helmet might declare his divine mandate, a warrior's his battlefield triumphs. Even the act of carving such detailed regalia in unyielding basalt speaks volumes. A society willing to invest weeks of labor on a single helmet's motifs was a society where appearance and authority were inseparable. The stones may be silent, but their headgear shouts across millennia, daring us to decode the stories woven into their folds. For decades, the assumption that the Olmec Colossal Heads depict exclusively male rulers went unchallenged, partly because their strong jawlines, stern expressions, and lack of overt female attributes fit traditional notions of ancient power. But archaeology rarely rewards assumptions. Among the thousands of Olmec artifacts recovered, a handful of rare female figurines and sculptures whisper a different story. Take the famous Señora de las Limas, a greenstone statue depicting a woman cradling a jaguar infant. Her elaborate headdress and seated posture suggest high status, possibly even a shaman or ruler. Then there's the Monument of the Woman, from La Venta, a full-figured sculpture with unmistakably female traits, her hands resting on what might be ceremonial regalia. These finds force us to reconsider whether the colossal heads' gendered interpretations say more about our biases than Olmec reality. Look closely at the heads themselves, and the binary starts to fray. While most display what we'd call masculine features, heavy brows, broad noses, a few, like Head 5 from San Lorenzo, have softer, rounder faces with less pronounced brow ridges. Their headdresses complicate things further. Some sport knotted bands resembling those worn by female figurines, while others feature abstract symbols that resist easy gender classification. Could these variations represent women leaders, or perhaps gender-fluid individuals embodying both masculine and feminine divine energies? The idea isn't far-fetched. Later Mesoamerican cultures, from the Maya to the Zapotec, revered figures like the goddess Tlazolteotl and the two-spirit Mux, proof that gender in the ancient Americas was far more nuanced than once believed. The debate ties into broader questions about Olmec social structure. If women or gender nonconforming individuals held positions of power, why wouldn't they be memorialized alongside male rulers? Etiopin Tequinetlan, a site linked to Olmec influence, murals show women participating in rituals once assumed to be male-dominated. Even the head's positioning hints at inclusivity. Some face cardinal directions associated with female deities in Mesoamerican cosmology. Perhaps the issue isn't that female leaders weren't depicted, but that we failed to recognize them. Modern reconstructions often add beards or exaggerated masculine traits based on expectation rather than evidence. The truth may lie in the middle. Some heads could represent councils of rulers, both men and women, while others might depict gods transcending gender altogether. Until inscriptions are found, if they exist, the head's silent faces keep their secrets. What's clear is that reducing them to simplistic gender categories does a disservice to a civilization capable of carving ambiguity into stone. After all, power isn't always masculine or feminine. Sometimes it's just monumental. Positioning the colossal heads wasn't just about artistry, it may have been a celestial conversation carved in stone. At La Venta, one of the most meticulously planned Olmec centers, archaeologists notice something peculiar. Several heads face not toward the city's central plaza, but outward, as if tracking the horizon. When researchers mapped their orientations, a pattern emerged. One group aligns with the sunrise during the equinoxes, while another points to the winter solstice sunset. This wasn't random placement, it was a deliberate dialogue with the cosmos, mirroring the Olmec's reverence for cycles of time and agricultural seasons. The heads, often assumed to be passive monuments, might have served as eternal witnesses to celestial events, their stony gazes marking moments when the heavens aligned with earthly power. La Venta's ceremonial layout deepens this connection. The site's main axis runs precisely 8 degrees west of true north, an orientation repeated in later Maya cities like Tikal. Along this axis, the Olmec arranged not just heads but massive altars and pyramidal mounds, creating a ritual pathway that mirrored the journey of the sun. Some scholars propose that during solstices, shadows cast by these structures interacted with the heads in specific ways, perhaps illuminating facial features or casting symbolic shapes. Imagine the impact on ancient observers. As the sun dipped low, a ruler's stone counterpart might appear to speak through shifting light and shadow, reinforcing divine authority tied to astronomical knowledge. Yet the head's placement also hints at terrestrial power plays. At San Lorenzo, they form a loose semicircle around the site's central plateau, their outward-facing positions creating a visual boundary. This isn't just art, it's a statement of control, a way to demarcate sacred space from the mundane. Some researchers suggest they marked processional routes, silent sentinels guiding pilgrims toward ceremonial cores. Others see them as territorial markers, their imposing presence warning outsiders of the consequences of crossing into Olmec lands. The duality is striking. These sculptures anchored both spiritual and political geography, their fixed stares serving as constant reminders of who or what held sway over land and sky. The most tantalizing clue lies in the head's relationship with water. Several at La Venta cluster near artificial ponds and channels, their bases partially submerged during seasonal floods. This intentional interaction with water mirrors later Mesoamerican beliefs, where reflections were seen as portals to the underworld. During rains, the head's faces might have appeared to emerge from mirrored surfaces, creating illusions of animation. It's a masterstroke of sacred theater using landscape, astronomy, and hydrology to transform static stone into living ritual participants. Whether tracking stars, defining borders, or channeling the divine, the Olmec heads were never just portraits. They were active players in a cosmology where earth and sky, ruler and realm, were inextricably linked. Every alignment, every carefully chosen sightline, whispers of a civilization that didn't just observe the universe, it sought to commune with it, using basalt and vision to bridge the human and the eternal. The rediscovery of the Olmec Colossal Heads reads like an archaeological thriller, full of chance encounters, stubborn skepticism, and stubborn Earth slowly yielding its secrets. One of the most dramatic moments came in 1939, when archaeologist Matthew Sterling unearthed Tres Zapot's head beneath a tangle of roots in southern Veracruz. Local farmers had long spoken of a stone giant buried near their fields, but it took Sterling's team weeks of backbreaking labor to free it from the grip of the soil. When the massive visage finally emerged, its features were so fresh, so startlingly lifelike, that workers reportedly fell to their knees, convinced they'd uncovered a living god. The head's discovery marked a turning point, forcing scholars to confront a civilization far older and more sophisticated than they'd imagined, one that predated the Maya by centuries. But Tres Zapotes was just the beginning. Across the Olmec heartland, farmers routinely stumbled upon these stone faces while plowing fields or digging irrigation ditches. In 1945, a campesino named Juan Valenzuela hit something unyielding with his plow near La Venta, the metallic clang revealing the forehead of what would become known as Monument 5. Years later, children playing near San Lorenzo tripped over a protruding chin that turned out to be Head 10, its surface weathered but its snarling expression intact. These chance finds hint at a staggering possibility. For every head we've recovered, others may still lie hidden, their locations lost when Olmec cities were abandoned or swallowed by the jungle. The irony is that many heads survive precisely because they were buried not by their creators, but by later cultures who may have viewed them as relics of a discredited past. At La Venta, several were found carefully placed in pits, arranged in lines or circles as if ritually interred. Some show signs of deliberate damage, noses broken. eyes gouged suggesting they were deactivated before burial. This pattern of preservation through destruction echoes across Mesoamerica. The Maya often entombed older monuments when building anew, treating them not as trash, but as sacred ancestors requiring respectful retirement. Modern technology is now narrowing the search for missing heads. LiDAR scans over the Tuxtla Mountains have revealed unnatural mounds that could conceal buried sculptures, while ground-penetrating radar at San Lorenzo detected anomalies matching the density of basalt. Yet the jungle guards its secrets fiercely. In 2012, a team following 16th-century Spanish accounts of stone heads in the wilderness spent months hacking through vegetation near Coatzacoalcos, only to find a massive head fragment too eroded to identify, proof that some discoveries may remain forever just out of reach. The most tantalizing clue comes from colonial-era maps. A Jesuit missionary's sketch from 1705 depicts a head near the Rio Chiquito, a region never systematically surveyed. Locals still speak of a sleeping stone man near the river's bend, but expeditions stall in the swampy terrain. Whether myth or memory, these whispers remind us that archaeology isn't just about digging up the past. Sometimes it's about listening to the land and to the people who have lived atop these mysteries for generations, waiting for the right moment to reveal them. Restoring an Olmec Colossal Head is like performing surgery on history itself. One wrong move, and an irreplaceable link to the past could vanish forever. Take San Lorenzo Monument 1, discovered half-buried and tilting precariously in 1984. Rainwater had seeped into its base for centuries, softening the soil beneath until the 20-ton sculpture threatened to topple. Conservationists faced a nightmare scenario: how to stabilize the head without altering its 3,000-year-old integrity. The solution was as delicate as it was ingenious. Teams dug narrow tunnels beneath the monument, inserting steel rods treated with anti-corrosive coatings to avoid contaminating the stone. Then they built a custom cradle of inflatable airbags, the same technology used in earthquake rescues, to lift the head just enough to replace eroded soil with a stabilized gravel mixture. Every millimeter of movement was monitored with laser levels, the modern world bending to preserve ancient craftsmanship, but not all restoration efforts have been so cautious. In the 1960s, workers at La Venta used concrete to repair a fractured head, filling cracks with a material the Olmec never knew. The result: a blotchy patina where modern gray clashed with weathered basalt, and worse, salt from the concrete began migrating into the stone, accelerating erosion from within. This well-intentioned mistake sparked fierce debates that still rage today. Where's the line between preservation and alteration? When a head loses its nose to erosion, should we accept the damage as part of its history, or sculpt a replacement based on similar monuments? The ethics grow murkier with digital reconstructions. Using 3D scanning, researchers have virtually restored damaged heads, projecting how they might have looked when first carved. At Tres Zapotes, this revealed traces of red pigment in the stone's pores, proof the heads were once brightly painted. But when a Mexican museum displayed a physical reconstruction with these colors recreated, purists recoiled. To some, it felt like rewriting history, imposing modern assumptions on an ancient aesthetic. Perhaps the most controversial case is Cobata Head, found in 1970, with its face deliberately smashed, possibly by the Olmec themselves. In 2018, a team proposed using AI to generate a speculative reconstruction of its original appearance. Critics argued this erased an essential part of the artifact's story: its intentional destruction. After all, the choices ancient people made about breaking objects can be as revealing as how they made them. The tension lies in balancing two truths: these heads are both artworks and artifacts. Every chip and crack tells a story of time's passage, but so does every surviving curve. Modern conservators now favor reversible techniques, like using removable epoxy for stabilization rather than permanent cement. At La Venta, damaged heads are displayed with clear acrylic supports, their modern aids visible but unobtrusive. It's a compromise that honors both the sculpture's original grandeur and their journey through the centuries, proving that sometimes the best way to preserve history is to let its wounds show. The Olmec Colossal Heads have transcended their ancient origins to become powerful symbols of Mexican identity, stone ambassadors of a shared cultural heritage. One need only glance at the 20-peso banknote to see their enduring influence. Since 2021, the image of San Lorenzo Head 8 has graced Mexico's currency, its stoic profile a daily reminder of the civilization that laid the foundations for Mesoamerican art, politics, and spirituality. This wasn't just a numismatic choice, it was a statement. By placing an Olmec head alongside national icons like the monarch butterfly and the yaupon holly, Mexico declared these ancient sculptures living emblems of resilience and continuity, their stone faces as relevant today as they were 3 millennia ago. Artists have long drawn inspiration from their enigmatic presence. Diego Rivera, the muralist who redefined Mexican visual culture in the 20th century, wove Olmec motifs into his sweeping narratives. In his Epic of the Mexican People series at the National Palace, Rivera depicted the Olmec not as primitive forerunners, but as sophisticated ancestors, their colossal heads appearing alongside Aztec emperors and revolutionary heroes as equals in Mexico's historical tapestry. His stylized reinterpretations, with their exaggerated lips and almond-shaped eyes, paid homage to the sculpture's distinctive aesthetics while infusing them with modern political resonance. Rivera understood what archaeologists were only beginning to grasp, that the Olmec were not a footnote, but the opening chapter of a story that still unfolds. Contemporary creators continue this dialogue. In Oaxaca, textile artists like Alejandra Gomez blend Olmec geometric patterns into vibrant tapestries, reimagining ancient symbols for new generations. Street murals from Mexico City to Guadalajara feature colossal heads recontextualized, sometimes wearing lucha libre masks or crowned with maize, fusing pre-Hispanic grandeur with pop culture vitality. Even film and music draw from this wellspring. The iconic head from La Venta made a cameo in the opening sequence of Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water, its submerged face echoing the movie's themes of hidden worlds and forgotten beauty. The head's cultural weight extends beyond artistry. During the 1994 Zapatista uprising in Chiapas, indigenous activists invoked the Olmec as proof of Mesoamerica's deep-rooted autonomy, their stone visages becoming silent witnesses to centuries of resistance. Today, schoolchildren across Mexico learn about the Olmec alongside the Aztec and Maya, their curriculum reflecting a hard-won acknowledgement that Mexican history didn't begin with the Spanish arrival. Museums like Mexico City's Museo Nacional de Antropología dedicate entire halls to these sculptures, presenting them not as relics, but as active participants in an ongoing cultural conversation. Perhaps the most poignant testament to their legacy lies in how they've been reclaimed by descendant communities. In Veracruz, the Papaluca people, who trace their roots to the Olmec heartland, incorporate the heads into annual festivals, adorning them with fresh flowers as if tending to ancestral spirits. Modern sculptors from the region, like Angel Serran, carve smaller replicas using traditional tools, a tangible link between past and present craftsmanship. The heads have even entered the digital age. Augmented reality projects now allow visitors to see the original pigments that once adorned them, their vibrant colors resurrected through smartphone screens. This cultural reawakening hasn't been without friction. Debates flare over whether the heads should remain in situ near their find spots or be centralized in major museums for safekeeping, a tension between local identity and national patrimony. Meanwhile, indigenous groups increasingly demand a voice in how these monuments are presented, pushing back against narratives that divorce the heads from living traditions. What's undeniable is their power to provoke. Whether stamped on coins, splashed across murals, or invoked in political discourse, the Olmec Colossal Heads refuse to be mere artifacts. They've become a mirror reflecting Mexico's endless negotiation with its own layered past, and proving that some stones speak louder than words. Even after decades of study, the Olmec Colossal Heads guard stubborn secrets, none more tantalizing than the fact that no two faces are identical. Each sculpture pulses with distinct personality, from the furrowed intensity of San Lorenzo's monument 1 to the almost serene composure of La Venta's head 4. This deliberate variety appends conventional wisdom about ancient monumentality, where rulers often demanded idealized uniformity. Were these portraits of individual leaders, capturing the quirks of real people, a scar, an asymmetrical brow, the hint of a smirk, or do they represent a pantheon of deities, each with unique attributes? The closest parallel might be the portrait busts of Roman emperors, but the Olmec predate that tradition by over 1,000 years. This individuality raises provocative questions. Did the Olmec value personal likeness in a way unmatched by later Mesoamerican cultures, or were these differences symbolic, a visual language of power we've yet to decipher? Then there's the enigma of color. Close examination of several heads reveals microscopic pigment traces, flecks of red ochre in the pores of basalt, faint traces of cinnabar in the crevices of headdresses. Recent spectrographic analysis at Tres Zapotes detected residues of hematite, suggesting these stoic gray giants may once have blazed with crimson, black, and perhaps even shimmering pyrite accents. Imagine the psychological impact: 20-ton faces, polished to a reflective sheen and painted in sacred colors, emerging from the jungle canopy during rituals. The Maya famously painted their monuments, but the Olmec may have taken it further, using pigments not just as decoration, but as transformative magic, turning stone into flesh through ritual color. Even more perplexing are the heads found deliberately buried, some arranged in precise lines or circles. At La Venta, 4 heads were discovered in a row, their basalt mouths stuffed with precious jade beads, a clear funerary gesture. Were these retirements of outdated symbols, or sacred interments like Viking ship burials? The practice mirrors the Mayas' termination rituals, where objects were ritually killed before burial, but the Olmec version feels more reverential. Some heads show intentional damage: noses broken, eyes gouged, yet were carefully laid to rest rather than discarded. This wasn't vandalism, it was ceremonial recycling, a way to release the spirit of the stone while honoring its past power. The greatest mystery, though, is what still lies hidden. LiDAR scans suggest undiscovered heads may lurk in the swamps of eastern Tabasco, their shapes blurred beneath centuries of silt. Farmers near Santiago Tuxtla whisper of a sleeping stone woman, half submerged in a mangrove forest, her location known only to elders. And in 2019, archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar at San Lorenzo detected a massive, head-shaped anomaly 30 feet underground, untouched for millennia, waiting for the moment when technology and patience can reunite it with the light. Every unanswered question is an invitation. Future digs may uncover a head with inscriptions, finally giving these faces voices. New imaging techniques could reveal hidden layers of paint, restoring their original vibrancy. Or perhaps we'll find a workshop littered with tools and half-finished carvings, offering a masterclass in Olmec artistry. What's certain is this: after a century of study, the heads still defy easy explanation, reminding us that the past never surrenders its secrets all at once, especially when those secrets are carved in 20 tons of unforgiving stone. Placing the Olmec Colossal Heads alongside other ancient monoliths reveals just how revolutionary their artistic vision truly was. Take Easter Island's Moai, for instance. Those towering figures share the Olmec's monumental scale, but their faces are rigidly stylized, with elongated noses and hollow eyes gazing blankly inland. They're symbols of collective identity, not individuals. The Moai were meant to be seen from afar, their simplified features readable across vast distances. The Olmec heads, by contrast, demand intimacy. Their expressive, lifelike details, the subtle creases around the mouth of San Lorenzo's head 5, the slightly raised eyebrow on La Venta's head 1 pull you in, as if each sculpture captures a fleeting moment of human emotion frozen in stone. This focus on realism is unparalleled in ancient monumentality. Even Egypt's mighty obelisks, though masterful in their geometric precision, prioritize abstract grandeur over personal likeness. Consider the differences in purpose. The moai likely served as ancestral markers, their backs to the sea as they watched over island villages. Egyptian obelisks covered in hieroglyphs functioned as solar symbols and political billboards. The Olmec heads, though positioned ceremonially, lack inscriptions or obvious celestial alignments. Their power lies in their humanity, where other cultures mythologize their monuments, turning rulers into gods or erasing individuality altogether. The Olmec seem to have celebrated the quirks of actual people. The slight asymmetry in Tres Zapot's Colossal Head 2's lips, the distinctive dimple on Monument 3 from San Lorenzo, these aren't generic traits. They feel observed, remembered, immortalized. Even the materials tell a story. Easter Island's moai were carved from soft volcanic tuff, easier to shape but prone to erosion. The Olmec chose basalt, a brutally hard canvas that demanded extraordinary effort for every nuanced curve. This wasn't just practicality, it was a statement. By wrestling such unyielding stone into lifelike forms, they asserted mastery over both art and nature, and while the moai and obelisks were often painted, their colors served symbolic or decorative roles. For the Olmec, pigment may have been transformative, turning stone into living flesh through sacred hues, as seen in the faint traces of red ochre still clinging to some head surfaces. What's truly striking is how these contrasts reflect deeper cultural values. The moai and obelisks broadcast collective power, the might of pharaohs or clans. The Olmec heads, though undoubtedly political, whisper of individuality in a way that feels startlingly modern. They're not just imposing, they're intimate. In a world where ancient monumentality usually meant losing oneself to abstraction, the Olmec dared to carve people, not just icons. That choice to memorialize the human in the monumental makes their legacy not just unique, but timeless. Among the more outlandish theories surrounding the Olmec Colossal Heads is the claim that they functioned as ancient power generators, an idea that sounds more like science fiction than archaeology. Proponents of this fringe view argue the head's hollowed-out eyes or headdress grooves could have held crystals or other materials to harness energy, pointing to alleged resonance frequencies in the basalt. Some even suggest they were part of a lost technological network, connecting to similar monuments worldwide. These ideas often stem from misinterpretations of the head's craftsmanship. The smooth interiors of eye sockets, for instance, were likely just polished to reflect light during rituals, not to channel electricity. Archaeologists counter these claims with physical evidence. No traces of advanced tools, wiring, or energy-manipulating devices have ever been found at Olmec sites. The basalt itself, while dense, shows no signs of artificial enhancement or unusual mineral content. More tellingly, the head's placements, often facing ceremonial plazas or celestial alignments, align with known Olmec spiritual practices, not engineering schematics. Scholars like Anne Cyphers emphasize that every tool, mark, and pigment stain on the heads fits squarely within the technological and cultural framework of preclassic Mesoamerica. The idea of power generation ignores the head's most obvious feature, their humanity. These are portraits, not machines, carved to honor individuals or deities, not to conduct energy. The persistence of such theories reveals a deeper pattern: the reluctance to credit ancient indigenous cultures with innovation without weaving in outside influences or fantastical elements. Similar claims have dogged the pyramids of Egypt and the Nazca lines, always framing non-Western achievements as too sophisticated to be human. This bias undermines the real marvel, that the Olmec, using only stone and sweat, created art that still captivates millennia later. Their genius needs no alien intervention or secret technology, just recognition of what's right before our eyes, a civilization that turned earth and effort into immortality. At its core, the debate isn't about the heads themselves, but how we engage with the past. Archaeology thrives on evidence, not speculation. Every scrape of a trowel, every soil sample analyzed, tells us these sculptures were rooted in ritual and power, not science fiction. The next time someone claims the heads were ancient batteries, ask this: why invent fantastical explanations when the truth, that human hands shaped these wonders without blueprints or gadgets, is extraordinary enough? For the Papaluca people living in the shadow of the Tuxtla Mountains, the Olmec Colossal Heads aren't just artifacts, they're fragments of a living oral tradition. One enduring legend tells of the Quinametsen, a race of giants who once walked the earth, their immense strength allowing them to shape stone with their bare hands. According to elders, these towering beings carved the heads as self-portraits, only to be punished by the gods for their arrogance, turned to stone where they stood. Variations of this tale persist across villages, with some storytellers describing the heads as sleeping guardians who will awaken when their people face grave danger. What's striking is how these narratives mirror archaeological realities. The sheer scale of the heads does suggest a superhuman effort, while their unfinished counterparts scattered near quarries could easily inspire tales of interrupted creation. Further south, Mix elders speak of the heads as petrified rulers from a golden age, their stern expressions watching over the land they once governed. A particularly vivid account from Ayatla describes a head near the Coatzacoalcos River that locals call Yahui, meaning the Watcher. Each year during the spring equinox, sunlight strikes its eyes at dawn, an event villagers interpret as the ancestor briefly returning to life. Such stories aren't mere folklore, they encode precise astronomical knowledge, preserving observation techniques passed down through generations. Modern LiDAR surveys have since confirmed that several heads align with solstice sunrises, suggesting these oral traditions may hold kernels of ancient intentionality. Among the Zapotec, a different thread emerges. Their legends describe the heads as markers of a great migration, each one representing a clan leader who guided people through flooded landscapes, a possible metaphor for the environmental changes that shaped early Olmec history. This resonates with geological evidence showing rising sea levels around 1200 BC may have displaced coastal communities. The stories even specify that the heads' headdresses denote rank during this journey, echoing scholars' theories about the sculpture's varying regalia indicating social hierarchy. These narratives do more than entertain, they act as vessels for ecological wisdom. Totonac healers near El Tajin still use the heads as teaching tools, noting how their placement near springs and caves reflects ancestral water management strategies. One healer recounts a parable about a head whose lips parted during drought, revealing an underground aquifer, a lesson about reading the land's subtle signs. Recent excavations at La Vente uncovered precisely such a hydrological system, with stone conduits redirecting water toward agricultural plots. The overlap between myth and infrastructure hints at a sophisticated interplay between oral tradition and practical knowledge. Yet the most poignant accounts come from the Nahua, who view the heads as interlocutors between worlds. A midwife from Pad, Japan, describes whispering prayers to a local head before difficult births, believing its stony gaze holds the calm of centuries. This ritual finds eerie parallel in Olmec figurines depicting childbirth, some found buried near colossal heads, as if to emphasize their protective role. Such continuity suggests these sculptures were never truly abandoned, merely entrusted to new generations of storytellers. The resilience of these traditions faces modern threats. As younger generations migrate to cities, fewer remain to recite the old stories verbatim, but some communities are fighting back. In Santiago Tuxtla, teachers have woven head-related myths into school curricula, pairing them with hands-on workshops where children sculpt miniature versions from local clay. Meanwhile, Papaluca filmmakers are documenting elders' narratives, overlaying them with drone footage of the actual heads to create living archives. These efforts acknowledge a profound truth: the stones may belong to museums, but their stories belong to the people who have kept them alive through millennia of retelling. What emerges is a dialogue across time, not just about the head's origins, but their enduring role as cultural touchstones, where archaeologists see tools and techniques, oral histories see personalities and purpose. Neither perspective is complete alone, but together they form a tapestry richer than either could weave independently. The next time you see an Olmec head's weathered face, remember, it's not just an artifact waiting to be deciphered. It's a participant in an unbroken conversation, one that began with the first chisel strike and continues every time a storyteller breathes life into the old words. The next frontier in unraveling the Olmec enigma lies not just in the dirt beneath our feet, but in the invisible wavelengths of light dancing across forgotten jungles. Imagine LiDAR technology, those same laser pulses that peeled back centuries of overgrowth to reveal lost Maya cities now trained on the swampy lowlands of Veracruz. Recent aerial surveys have already detected unnatural mounds near San Lorenzo with the distinct density of buried basalt, their shapes too symmetrical to be natural formations. One particularly tantalizing anomaly, roughly 3 meters in diameter and aligned along a celestial axis, may well be the silhouette of a colossal head waiting for its first dawn in 3 millennia. Archaeologists are racing to ground truth these digital ghosts, knowing each scan could rewrite our understanding of how far the Olmec's influence truly reached. But the revolution isn't just about finding more heads, it's about decoding the ones we have with microscopic precision. Advanced residue analysis techniques, originally developed for forensic investigations, are now being applied to the sculpture's weathered surfaces. Using hyperspectral imaging, researchers at the University of Veracruz recently identified traces of an organic binder mixed with hematite in the pores of La Venta's head, for evidence that these stoic faces may once have been slathered in vivid red pigments as part of ritual renewals. Even more startling are the nanoscale flecks of what appears to be cinnabar embedded in headdress grooves, a mercury-based mineral sacred across Mesoamerica for its blood-like hue and toxic brilliance. Future studies aim to reconstruct full pigment recipes, potentially revealing how color transformed stone into living effigy during ceremonies. The real game-changer may lie in environmental DNA. Soil samples taken from the bases of several heads contain traces of ancient pollen and phytoliths, microscopic plant fossils that act as time capsules of past landscapes. By analyzing these botanical fingerprints, scientists hope to pinpoint not just when the heads were installed, but what ceremonies surrounded them. Did the Olmec carpet processional routes with specific flowers during solstice alignments? Did they embed offerings of rare seeds in the soil beneath each monument? One ambitious project is even testing for ancient microbial DNA, theorizing that the unique microbiome of human hands, whether artisans or worshippers, could linger in the stone's deepest crevices after centuries. Then there are the whispers of uncharted territory. Satellite thermal imaging has revealed potential ceremonial structures beneath the mangrove forests of western Tabasco, their outlines mirroring the sacred geometry of known Olmec sites. Local Nahua fishermen speak of a city of stone faces, submerged in the coastal lagoons near Alvarado, a claim that gained credibility when Hurricane Carl in 2010 exposed strange basalt columns offshore. Marine archaeologists are now collaborating with indigenous guides to explore THESE Chinese letter WATERS, knowing that rising sea levels 3,000 years ago may have drowned entire chapters of Olmec history. The most tantalizing questions may require rethinking our tools altogether. Quantum magnetometry, a nascent technology capable of detecting minute disturbances in Earth's magnetic field, could someday map entire Olmec workshops underground, revealing not just finished heads, but the quarries, tool caches, and apprentice carvings that shape them. Meanwhile, AI pattern recognition is being trained on known sculptures to identify potential fingerprints of individual artisans, much like art historians distinguish Renaissance masters by brushstroke. If successful, we might finally know whether these heads were the work of a single genius or generations of anonymous craftsmen. What's clear is that the Olmec heads are no longer static museum pieces, they are becoming dynamic datasets. Each crack and mineral deposit a line of code in a civilization's untold story. The answers won't just come from shovels and sieves, but from particle accelerators analyzing pigment molecules and algorithms reconstructing eroded features. As these stone faces step into the light of 21st century science, they bring with them a humbling reminder: some mysteries aren't meant to be solved quickly, only explored deeply, one laser scan, one soil sample, one whispered legend at a time. The Olmec Colossal Heads stand as silent witnesses to one of history's most captivating riddles, an ancient civilization that defied limitations with nothing but stone and sheer determination. Even after decades of study, their creation remains a staggering feat. Imagine artisans under the relentless Mexican sun, chiseling 20-ton basalt boulders into faces so lifelike, they seem to breathe across millennia. The logistics alone boggle the mind, quarrying without metal, transporting without wheels, perfecting without modern tools. Yet the Olmec didn't just overcome these challenges, they transformed them into art, leaving behind monuments that whisper of a society far more sophisticated than we ever imagined. But the true enigma lies in their purpose. Were they portraits of rulers, their stern gazes meant to awe subjects into obedience, or perhaps deified ancestors, watching over sacred spaces with stone-bound vigilance? The variety in their expressions, some serene, others scowling, suggests a narrative we've only begun to decipher. And then there's the mystery of their placements, aligned with solstice sunrises or clustered near ceremonial ponds, as if the Olmec wove astronomy and hydrology into their very foundations. These heads weren't just sculptures, they were active participants in a cosmic dialogue, bridging earth and sky, the mortal and the divine. What's most humbling is how much we still don't know. Why were some heads buried with care, while others were left unfinished? What stories do their individualized features tell of power, of lineage, of beliefs lost to time? Even modern science, with its LiDAR scans and DNA analysis, can only peel back so many layers. The Olmec's brilliance lies not just in what they achieved, but in the questions they compel us to ask. They remind us that history isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation to be joined, one where every discovery leads to new wonder. So the next time you see one of these stone giants, whether in a museum, a photograph, or your imagination, pause for a moment. Consider the hands that shaped them, the minds that envisioned them, and the culture that revered them. And if you're hungry for more journeys into the past, don't forget to subscribe. From lost cities to forgotten empires, there are always more mysteries waiting to be uncovered. The Olmec heads taught us that much. The past is never truly silent. It just asks us to listen a little closer.